And we're live.
We are live. Did you click on the thing and get the thing?
I don't know what thing and thing means.
Go back to YouTube. You have to click that window to
right.
pull up the chat.
Refresh the window.
And refresh. And then click on the window.
Alright, now I see you.
Alright. Good evening. Welcome to my Transylvania castle. Oh wait. Is tonight Monday or Tuesday?
Monday.
Hi, welcome to Glenhaven here. Wrong show. Don't worry about that. That's tomorrow's show. How is everybody doing out there watching in Internet TV land? Log in on your YouTube account and go to chat if you have questions, and we will proceed. Last week we focused a lot on the meditation we're doing and altering consciousness that way, and the instructions, and we're expecting one, maybe two more people here live. And if and when they get here, we will maybe go over that a little more again. But at this point, we need to move on. Let me just say about our meditation to upgrade human consciousness. The purpose of this is to inject a coherent signal of brain waves into the human collective consciousness that carries the specific message we're talking about, which is normal, healthy, optimal weather everywhere now. And the second half is God lives, love is the answer. And we're doing that twice a day at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And we're not doing it right now, at least I'm not doing it right now, 7 p.m. Pacific time, by the way, for wherever you are in the world. That's the best time, because I'm doing this. It's okay. I've had a few conversations with a few people. It's absolutely okay if you don't do both. Try to do at least one of them a day. I would say, very honestly, about half the time I only get one in, because my evenings in particular get busy. So 7 a.m. is a good time for me to take a break from my morning activities, and then that's when I try to do it every day. I think I've missed once of the morning. And I've also had questions from people regarding, can they do it a little bit different or at a little bit different time? And the answer is yes. Everything you do helps. If you are putting conscious intent into normal weather and love and helping people realize that God really exists, then that's all good. At least for now, in these meditations. I would rather have you doing this and getting regular and making this a habit. And I'm not going to worry about subtle details just yet. In the future, the power of this technique is the same power as turning the light from these ordinary light bulbs into lasers. You've heard me say that before. It's coherency. It's every wavelength exactly the same, not the bell curve spread of frequencies. And the power level's the same, but the frequency is most important. And that's what turns ordinary light into a laser. It's all vibrating in the same direction at the same time, exactly in step. The difference between an organized marching band and an incoherent mob milling about the field. That would be the Stanford Marching Band, who prides itself on being disorganized, and while they take great pride in that, they're actually the butt of every joke of literally every other marching band in the whole country, if not the whole world. I've never been in a marching band. But I know things because I have a relative who was in the University of Washington marching band, and that's how I learned all this stuff. But it's a great example because the Stanford band is all over the place, and every other good band, like the Washington marching band that my older sister was in, that won prizes and all sorts of things, they march in the same step. And that's what we want. The thought form that we are injecting through the Akadwa into the Earth/human consciousness field to be the same. So over time, the closer we get to those coherencies of exactly the same message at exactly the same time, the more effect we will have, the more positive beneficial effect we will get. But right now, we're training you every bit as much as we are changing the world. I can already hear your next question, which is, how does this work? Well, the way it works is, when we put this signal into the consciousness field, an amplified, Akadwaized, coherent signal has the ability to neutralize all the other thought forms that are in the human consciousness field. The ones that are saying, oh, we got to spray these chemtrails to save the planet from global warming. Oh, it's really okay because I'm getting paid a lot of money to fly this plane or to make these chemicals. These HAARP machines really are going to save the world because it's the only way we can have weather. Well, what the human race and the rest of the planet did for a few billion years before we had HAARP, but we still had weather. So those are the erroneous thought forms that these people have been told. And they're not getting any other signal coming into them. And the other side is using weaponized technology to keep those thought forms in the human consciousness field. Kind of the same way that all your friends who haven't woken up to the realities of evil intent behind weather modification, as one example of many of how the dark side is trying to social engineer our world. This is just one example of many that we could go into, but it's the one we chose first. Is normal, healthy weather everywhere now. Normal, healthy, optimal weather everywhere now. And God lives, love is the answer. So that signal is going to start creeping into the little nooks and crannies where other people have been trying to plan things. All of a sudden they just aren't going to be. The other message will start to weaken, our message will start to strengthen, and that's when we start making progress. They are getting a handle on this Reading car fire, C-A-R-R. It was started, ironically, by a car on Carr Road.
Interesting.
I'm sure that we know, we who watch these things know that there was dark technology involved in this fire, and it's tragic, and people died. 3 civilians and either 2 or 3 firefighters died in this huge fire. About 40% of the city of Reading had to evacuate. Reading is a city of about 100,000 people, and about 40,000 was the highest number I heard, had to evacuate for a time. All those evacuations have been lifted. Everybody has access to go back to their homes and try to sift through rubble and collect whatever belongings they can. Little Eagle, welcome. Oh, you can kick Mina out of that chair.
She's keeping it warm for you.
Yeah, go to the other camera just so people can see Mina in the chair.
There's Mina. Hi, kitty. Say hi, Mina.
Hi,
Oh.
Citlamina. We have friends in Southern California who were the people who gave us Citlamina, so they like to see her from time to time. when
So
we do these
if
things.
Yvonne's gonna sit there,
I'm not moving.
she's not moving and we can't see her.
Okay,
That's okay.
time out. Technical.
I can
Operation.
swing a little bit more. Oh shoot! What did I just do? I
You
unplugged something.
unplugged the light that was behind you.
Okay. So now we see too much of the couch and Yvonne. And so you can come back. Yeah.
Now what? Now which way?
Now we see if Yvonne needs to talk, she needs to lean towards Mina and then we'll see her.
How's that?
Now we see half of me, but I can do the same thing. If I need to, I can come over here.
Now, do you need me to reach down and plug that other cord back in?
No. I just,
Oh, it's under your chair.
I know, there's just a bunch of stuff here.
Isn't technology wonderful when it works?
Well,
I'm talking to the camera, not to you.
what I should have done was go ahead and read a couple comments, if
Oh,
you don't
okay.
mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me move this back. So, we have Melody and Maria and Sarah online.
Okay. Hi, Melody, Maria, and
Hello,
Sarah.
everyone.
And regarding participating in the joint project, Sarah said that she's been participating most of this past week. She said, I like how I can feel the shift when it goes from weather to love. And I've had a few mornings that I've had to do it with my second attention as I was getting ready for work.
I've done that too. That's a good step to have figured out, Sarah.
And then Maria says, I can feel the shift too, like it goes up an octave. So I think what they're talking about is focusing on the weather part of it and then shifting to the...
Let me pause right there before you go on to the next comment. Is one of the things I do is I go back and forth. I'll start with the weather, and I'm observing as I'm doing this, the earth turning, and it's not just sending there, but I'm sensing what's going on the planet and trying to focus sometimes greater concentration over the geographical areas of the planet that I'm holding in my hand. And then I go back and forth. Then I'll do God lives, love is the answer, and then I'll go back and forth for a while. What's next?
hold on, I'm trying to arrange my screen so I can see both things, but I guess not. So it looks like Sarah says that Cherie is not coming, that she got a message she was going to sleep.
Okay. Yeah, I talked with Cherie mid-afternoonish today.
Yeah, that's the majority of it.
Okay.
So.
So yeah, this car fire is highly suspicious, and I'm not going to dwell on that tonight because we're focusing on a solution to that, not just for this one location and one region, but for the whole planet. So over the next weeks and months, you're going to be hearing a lot more about the evidence for the car fire. So keep doing that. This is the meditation that we're going to keep doing for a while. We may modify it in the future, augment it with something else, and at some point we may shift to another subject or do one subject in the morning, one in the evening. But for now, this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to keep going over it every week unless somebody has a specific question. So just keep doing this. If you have questions, contact me, and keep going. The physics of how this process is working, I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm going to talk about both some basic physics and some advanced metaphysics, just a little, to whet your appetite and hopefully get you wanting more. There's a basic physics phenomenon. It's a wave phenomenon known as interference. It's when two or more waves are operating in one media, that's the thing that's vibrating to transmit the energy as a wave, it's called a media. When you have two or more waves in the same media at the same time, everywhere they interact, waves will either add or subtract depending on the crest aligning with a crest. You get an add and a bigger wave. If you get a crest aligning with a trough, you get a neutralization. Both types of that interaction are called interference. And when they add, it's called constructive interference. And when they neutralize, that's called destructive interference. So, random waveforms pretty much cancel out. Maybe there's a little bit of white noise down at the bottom. And when you're turning on your radio and you're listening and there's a little bit of static until you get to a channel, that's that background noise that we're talking about. There's a little bit of random radio waves from that star, from the sun, from all these other radio stations are out of range, and so there's this little bit of noise there, and it adds, subtracts, and the net result is there's just a barely detectable signal. That's what goes on for the most part in the human collective consciousness field. It's just noise. You know, I'm rooting for my team to win the Super Bowl. You're rooting for the other team to win the Super Bowl. That cancels out, right? Now, if we could literally get everybody who's watching the Super Bowl at the same time to all root for the same team, you would sway the results. They could be 20 points behind in the fourth quarter. They would come back and win if we turned on that. That technique has stopped nuclear wars, by the way. They did an experiment on an incident in the Middle East once. So when we have mostly noise, and then we have one side coming up with this pro-global warming, bad weather agenda, and nothing to counteract it, that's what wins. People start to believe it. You know, you see things on the internet like, oh, the science is settled. Oh, except don't look at this website over here where 10,000 scientists have signed a petition saying, no, it's not, this data is forged. And here's the evidence, which, of course, our lamestream media ignores. So we're not trying to fight that monster. Not directly. What we're trying to do is we're putting into the human collective consciousness field a signal to counter all these other signals that are going out to the public who believe it, to the media who buys it hook, line, and sinker, to all the people engaged in the process, and we're putting out a different signal to neutralize what they've been told and bring in this higher signal of God love that lives, and love is the answer. So really, our first signal is neutralizing their signals. And then we're back to neutral. Everything just white noise. And in comes, as you correctly deduced, a higher power, higher frequency signal. It's the frequencies you're mostly detecting. And that's how we do this when we're on a shamanic path. Because we don't fight it directly. We don't have big enough hammers to go hit everybody on the head who's involved in this. No matter how fun that might sound to you. We just don't. So we're going to do it this way. The metaphysical part of this is a field of science called thought forms. Everything that we think of creates a very complex waveform on the higher planes. Thought forms can be real entities. You can, for example, and I'm going to borrow something told to me by my teacher, Coyote, because he uses the gaming technique of Dungeons and Dragons to train his students who are local and can physically meet and play D&D about avatars and your archetypes and your personalities and how to play the game by identifying with the character you create. And you can't play the game as you have to play the game as the character. And that's a thought shift, that's a point of view, a perspective shift you have to make. And it's the same perspective that good actors make when they go on stage or in front of the camera and they're playing their character. They're no longer Humphrey Bogart, they're Sam Spade, right? If you don't know who those characters are, shame on you. Get on YouTube, find out. You have to be that character, right? So when a group using the Ikadwa develops a coherency of thought over a period of time, these fictional characters actually take on and become real. It's like creating an elemental out of these combined thought forms. And they can take on a life and a personality and do things and communicate with the players in the game. You can do the same thing with online avatars. If you're doing one of those many online gaming situations where you create an avatar that you drive around and it interacts in a different world, and if you put enough attention into that, it too can start communicating with you and may even take over the controls of the game. So the thought forms, well, first off, the basic physics description I gave you is accurate up to a point as far as what we're doing with this consciousness field. What I gave you was the Physics 101 version. Now, for those of you who have forgotten your college physics, there's 3 levels of first-year college physics. There's Physics 101, which covers the basics of Newtonian physics in 1 semester. It uses low-level math like algebra. And then there's what's called college physics, which is 2 semesters, same material, but it adds in trigonometry so you can resolve vectors and do cool things like that. And then the highest level of first-year physics is called university physics, and it uses calculus, not just trig and not just algebra, and you can derive all these formulas and you can solve things that the other 2 forms of physics can't. So I gave you the lowest level Physics 101 definition of interference. Think of this as like a wave oscillating in a ripple tank or a pond. You throw one pebble over here, one pebble over here, their waves interact, and you can see those interference patterns in a 2-dimensional, basically, environment. Now, we go to the higher planes, and we've created thought forms, complex thought forms. Another name for these complex thought forms is paradigms. And the paradigms are this complex set of beliefs that we all have, that our whole society shares, and everyone is so sure it's right that we never question it.
The world's flat.
That's my classic example. I use that picture of Columbus's 3 ships sailing off the edge of the world. I've used it in at least 2 or 3 of my blogs this summer. as the flat Earth paradigm, and then I used the classic photo taken by Apollo 8 astronauts when they were the first crew to send people around the moon and come back. They didn't land yet. They were still testing other technologies first. And they took a picture that's called Earthrise over the moon. So the moon is in the foreground, Earth is rising over it as they came around, and it's the picture worth 1,000 words, as I say, for defeating the flat Earth paradigm. And then when you look at all the Apollo pictures, it's like, okay, here's the big Earth, and it's leaving, and it gets smaller, 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 and the moon's getting bigger, 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 and somebody, I think, put that to a movie somewhere once. But anyway, that's the paradigm. And so paradigm is very complex. It's not a simple wave like a pebble in a pond. Thought forms are multidimensional and they're complex. And the more people who buy into them, the more powerful they are. It takes a big shock to defeat a major paradigm. That's why Kuhn always said it took 2 generations, because people just dogmatically hang on to these old paradigms and won't let them go. And they have to, a lot of them have to literally die before the new paradigm has a way. It's like you have to kill the weeds, pull them out before this next generation plant can grow and come out of your garden and bloom. So the thought forms we're creating have to be equally complex in order to neutralize those big, strong, complex thought forms. And that's what we're doing with these meditations. The Akadwa and the intelligence behind it and the unity we are connected to is what's driving this. And we don't have to figure out the equations. That's the really cool thing here. That's being done for us. We just have to get on the same page and agree on the content, which is what we've talked about. And this is not something that's taught in physics classes. It's not taught in psychology classes. Trying to get psychologists to read quantum physics, even if it says quantum physics in minutes, they just won't. Do you know the page you opened to? You didn't look. It's like when you open a Bible at an altar, you always look. What's there? Testing Schrodinger's cat is where we opened today. And I wanted the quantum physics energy on our altar because of this very thought-formed discussion. So quantum physics is that very complex field that's part of what's called modern physics, which came about, as you know, because of all the stuff that Newtonian physics couldn't solve. It's what goes on at the level of very, very small, primarily, subatomic particles. And interestingly enough, that's the level where the Akadwa works. So you see there's a reason we have quantum physics books on the altar today and why we're talking about physics. The Akadwa is a substance. The matter is basically an octave higher than the waveforms that make up matter. In this is matter, but it's also a waveform. Very complex equation for this table here. So complex, we can't solve it. I can build this table. I didn't build this one, but I could if I had the right tools. I mean, we build tables, we build chairs, we build houses. But we can't build the equation at a quantum mechanical level for this table. So we don't have to. We just set a target, and the universe and the Akadwa and the intelligence that's tied in can modify things at the quantum physical level, quantum mechanical level. And that's how the big, complex, multi-dimensional waveform that's bad can be neutralized by one that's good, and let a better message take its place. That's how paradigms change. Sometimes it takes a big shock, like somebody sailing across the Atlantic Ocean and not falling off the edge of the world, and there's still people who didn't believe it. And so a few years later, the crew of Ferdinand Magellan sailed around the world. Magellan only got halfway, and then he died. So Magellan himself didn't make it back. But his crew did, and they sailed all the way around the world. They started going west, and they kept going west, and darn, they got back to where they started. Almost as if the earth is round. You know, the only thing those flat earthers have to fear is sphere itself.
Keep your day job.
Which one would that be? The rocket scientist, the shaman,
Not
the stand-up comedian? I did 20 years of stand-up comedy at Turkeys Running Wild, so I've got experience with that. So consciousness is complex on one hand and basic on the other. And what it comes down to is...
Physics.
Huh?
Free will.
Almost.
Quantum physics.
I didn't understand the question.
Consciousness can be complicated, but at one hand it's easy. So to do all this consciousness work, what's the key?
Do your will.
Almost. I'm going to keep going back and forth until one of you gets it.
Come on, ladies online. We need some help here.
Okay, yeah.
Quantum physics.
Almost. But I like the way you think. Next.
God.
Almost. Actually, yeah, but be more specific. Next.
Just tell us.
Is there anybody commenting online?
No.
No. How about intent?
Right. So can you rephrase the whole thing, because I don't really understand the question.
I didn't get the question either.
Okay. The Akadwa is the substance that merges in with all of our atoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can extend our fields. The Akadwa is multidimensional, right? It instantly and more strongly connects us to all the higher planes. It's one of its beautiful things about it I love so much. So we're trying to create thought forms on these higher planes from our little old 3/4 dimensional world, if you include time, from a very limited point of view that's the equivalent of down a long, deep, narrow hole at the bottom of the well, and we're trying to affect things on the surface, almost like the allegory of the cave analogy. We're still changing the cave, but we want to change what's going on outside the cave. And the Akadwa is this tool that allows us to do that. So it comes down to our intent. We send an intent signal through the Akadwa to all the other planes. It connects with the unity of the universe, that unity uttermost shown. And the universe is just kind of waiting. It's like, when are you humans going to get it? Kind of attitude. I'm ready, I can do it, but you got to want it. You know, we have to ask. Mm-hmm. Scriptures throughout time, all over the world say, ask. You have to initiate. Because the universe gave us free will. If the universe plays the game for us, then we're not learning, and this is a training ground. We're supposed to be learning. So the intent, that's the big key, is a strong intent amplified by the Akadwa.
Apparently when you were doing your your rocket science shaman comedian thing, there was a frozen screen and shutdown, and Maria says her computer exploded, and Melody's talking about interference. So I just asked if everyone's back yet, and I haven't heard anything. Nope. He broke the internet. That's what Sarah said. See what happens when you tell jokes?
No, the problem was that wasn't amplified by your laughter. So you have to laugh at the bad jokes of the shaman. It's not a question of are they good jokes or bad jokes. I can tell you the answer to that before I tell the joke.
And then the other day you say I laughed at the drop of a hat. So should I laugh? Should I not laugh?
It works. All I had to do was drop the hat. And then my pencil goes flying. And my notes go flying.
He's on a roll.
So, this consciousness stuff is your intent. And we do, in fact, need a clear intent. Is everybody back?
I think so. I'm not going to go there with comments. So they have all commented in one way or another. So I believe they're all.
So none of them like my bad jokes. Okay. Well. They know the whole newt thing, right?
Newt? Oh.
Monty Python, the newt thing.
Well, they really are not up to par if they don't know Monty Python.
Okay, I'm going to assume they know Monty Python. So when I turn people into a newt, they don't get better. That's all I'm going to say about you not laughing at my jokes. Okay? So in order to have an intent, you can have intents that aren't in alignment with your will, or you can have intents that are in alignment with your will. Which is better?
In alignment.
Yeah. That one was one of those no-brainer, doesn't take a rocket scientist questions. One of the aspects of that process of knowing your will and holding an intent that I haven't talked about probably enough is the concept of know thyself. Many of the ancient mystery schools would carve, that's the word, carve those words in whatever language they were in and using over the entrance to their school. The doorway, stone usually, they carve the words, know thyself. And if you really want to understand the key to success in an esoteric path, no matter the system, and especially a shamanic system, you have to know thyself. Some of the earliest exercises that we taught you were finding your place of power, which there's 3 parts. So I'm going to quiz people now. People, not Bonnie, because I know she knows the answer, but Little Eagle over here and the people online. What are the 3 parts of the place of power exercises that I taught you?
Don't ask me today.
Nobody knows. So the first one is called the draining exercise. That's placing your attention at the different points on your body, moving up the body, and whatnot. The other one, the second one is the dreamer's stare, where you learn to look everywhere simultaneously with diffused vision. And that's the state to be in to start seeing between the planes. And then the next one, the third, is removing the social mask. So we all have those doctor, rocket scientist, farmer, barbarian,
Stand-up comedian.
stand-up comedian. No, we leave that one in. Stand-up comedian masks that we have to remove, and we keep removing layers until we get down to the true us, our true essential self. And that's something you should be doing periodically. I'm not going to tell it's got to be part of your daily personal practice, but if you haven't done it in a while, pick it up and do those again. And removing the social mask is particularly powerful when you do it in front of a mirror. You're making contact with yourself in the mirror, and you go through that. And then you can do some experimentation. You can do you probably already noticed that people, when you go out into the world, will interact very differently depending on what clothes you wear.
Or a hat.
Well, that's where I'm going with the hats.
Yeah.
That's why they're sitting here. So if wear blue jeans and a polo shirt and a black hoodie, you're going to get a very different response when you go into a convenience store at 10 o'clock at night than if you walk in wearing a tuxedo. Your hair could be the same, everything else the same, but your clothes, you look like you could be a homeless vagabond, which is kind of how I dress when I work at the farm every day, is the homeless vagabond look. Or you can look like you just came back from a wedding dressed in a tuxedo. So I did some experiments over the last year. Different places, not just here in the little village I live in or near, and not just in the small cities we have up here at the northern end of the state, but up and down the whole state. I was making a trip to LA, and every time we stopped for gas, every time I got out at a rest stop, I'm obviously wearing the same clothes every time, and I put on a different hat. So in addition to this hat, or one that I had at the time that was very similar that since has been destroyed, this is my farm hat. Keeps the sun off my head and out of my eyes, and I've got my rooster feather tails on it, and I'll wear this to town if I'm working on the farm, right? And then this gives a certain appearance, and I, when I'm wearing this hat, will adopt a different persona. Farmer Bob there, yeah, all right. Hey, old hillbilly Joe here, right? I'm the farmer. I'm hauling hay, I'm hauling wood, I'm doing whatever. I'm at the feed store. See, I wear this in the feed store. Nobody bats an eye. They'll go, hey, nice rooster feather or something, but they don't think it's off. I wear this down around town in the city, like Reading. People kind of look at you a little funny. And so this is my town hat. It doesn't actually fit as well as this one, but it's black felt. It's like formal wear. You know, I can wear this with my tuxedo. And it's a black hat, though. That might be sinister. If I pull it down, it's very different. And at the time I did this experiment, I had two black baseball-style caps. One had a Masonic emblem, and one had a Ski Patrol emblem. And I can't find my Ski Patrol hat. It's lost, or it got stolen. I don't know. It just kind of disappeared. And hopefully it'll turn up when I clean out a closet or something. And so everything else the same. These two hats, very different response. The two ball caps, very different response. The Masonic one, people kind of look at you. Oh, okay, you're paying me, so I'll look at you. But they didn't. Whenever I wear that Masonic one, it's rare to have anybody initiate a conversation. Take it out, both black with just a little bit of color on the logo. put on the ski patrol hat, and all of a sudden everybody gets real friendly. They want to start conversations. Had a picture of a mountain and it said ski patrol and it had a red cross on it. Yeah, everybody wanted to talk to you. Take that one off, put the other on, same person, right? But there's a persona that goes with these. And when you change the hats, you change your persona. And I would encourage all of you to do some equivalent type of experiment. It could be with hats, it could be with jewelry, it could be your clothes. And what you're looking for isn't the reaction of the other people directly. It's the reaction within you of which their reaction is a measure. Does that make sense? You should become aware that you are different. When I put on the black hat or the straw hat or the ball cap, even though the clothes were same, I became different. And it's part of this knowing yourself. It's part of removing those layers. You've got to be aware and truly grok the concept that you are different and that you have these layers and that we turn them on and turn them off. And the removing the social mask is a good exercise to start that process. But out there in the world, which is where we all have to work, that's where this know thyself exercise becomes important. And it goes towards your motivations, which goes towards your intent. And your intent then drives your building of the personal power. It drives these meditations to change the world. Make sure we're changing it for the right reasons, make sure that we're changing it, and keep in mind for the benefit of all beings everywhere. You notice that these meditations we're doing are not doing anything to harm the people engaged in this very bad behavior, this very negative behavior towards humanity and the planet. We're giving them a new standard. All these things go towards you understanding yourself, knowing yourself, and this consciousness. And yeah, if you want to read physics, yeah, this little quantum physics books, I picked this up. Where did I get this? I picked this up. It's called Quantum Physics in Minutes by Gemma Lavender. See, I just hold the glasses, my vision gets better. By Gemma Lavender. Find the right page again. Schrodinger. And it's one page and a picture, right? And that's it. And that's the whole thing. And then all you have to do is 2 minutes to read a section, and you will amaze yourself how much quantum physics you will know in a very short period of time. In fact, Bonnie is now the one who lectures on quantum physics. It's like that famous joke about Einstein when he was lecturing. And he had his chauffeur who took him around everywhere. And the chauffeur casually mentioned, you know, you've given this lecture so many times, I'll bet I could give it for you. It's, well, hey, let's test it. We'll go to this next place. They don't know me here. I've never been there. They've never seen pictures of me. So you give the lecture and I'll pretend to be the chauffeur. So they swap spots. They get there and they get almost to the end of the lecture and somebody raises their hand and asks a question, and it's a very complex question. And of course the chauffeur doesn't know the answer. It's one that's never been asked. He's never heard the answer before. And so he says, you know, chauffeurs used to bad traffic in the cities, they can think on their feet. That's what this guy said was. You know, that's a good question, but it's so basic and fundamental. I'm actually shocked that you even had to ask it. Why, it's so simple, I'm going to have my chauffeur answer it. So Bonnie's now the one who lectures, and I'm the chauffeur on the side, and then when she has one, she can answer. No, I'm going to let my houseboy answer that question. Houseboy.
Well, what I was going to offer is that for those of you who don't understand why you might want to know quantum physics, is that it basically proves all of the things that we know to be true through metaphysics. So
how could that possibly be true?
It's true. So, and even the word quantum in particular, it gets thrown around a lot. Quantum this and quantum that, and I'm not exactly sure that people using it know what it means. But for me, it was interesting to understand that, you're in one level or you're in another level, but you're not sliding between levels. And so this answers a lot of questions about how we can be in different places and how we can move from one situation into a next. And I guess also kind of going back to what you were saying about the place of power, is that those 3 points are really good to add to your personal practice. And the point is, in the Toltec system, is that when you can be told to get to your place of power and do it just like that. So in other words, just in that moment, you've drained any excess energies, you've diffused your vision so you're seeing with your peripheral vision, and you've released identification with, whatever personalities that you put out there, then you're really ready to work as a Toltec warrior. And so you want to be able to do that enough times that you're going to be able to get to your place of power quickly, because the world's changing and we can't really afford to freak out. EJ has a saying that it's okay to feel fear, it's not okay to panic. So I think we need to start getting those skills where we don't let little things rattle our cage so easy.
I agree. So this is a good book about quantum physics, one that relates those concepts back to bridging the gap a little bit between the physics world and the metaphysical world and the spiritual world, is the Dancing Wu Li Masters. It's on the reading list, so when you have some spare time and whatnot, feel free to tune in to the Dancing Wu Li Masters. So that's a little bit more about the process from a physics point of view, and our intent, and being aware, being present with everything that you're doing. Sort of like the Akkad was. At some point we never turn it off, we just maybe turn it down a little, and then we can, it's like the radio analogy, when your favorite song comes on, you crank up the volume a little bit more, you crank up the Akkad a little more. You could make a good case that that's exactly the way we should be approaching life from the standpoint of our place of power. You should never not be in your place of power. Maybe you turn it off a little bit. Maybe it's down, not off, but maybe you turn it down a little bit. But at some point, you want to always be maintaining that sense of awareness, of using your etheric body as that sensing organ.
The stalker.
This is the stalker skill. Exactly. Anytime you walk into a room, you should instantly fill that space with your attention. Just what's there. And before you walk through that door to the next space, send your attention ahead of you. That's my kitchen and dining room over there. I've been there before. I know what that space is like. If I send my attention ahead of me, I'm just sensing anything that's different. So if there's a mugger who broke into the house standing there with a club waiting for me to walk through and get hit over the head, I should sense that before I walk through that doorway. And assuming they speak English, I can tell him, you might as well come out now, because if I come in, bad things will happen to you. Famous scene in the movie The Seventh Samurai. Have you guys seen it?
Yes.
You have. I made you watch it.
Yes.
It's one of the classic all-time martial arts films set in Japan. It was the basis for the Western movie starring Yul Brynner called The Magnificent Seven. They modeled after that. And they're trying to recruit 7 samurai to go off and defend a village. And the last guy they get who's pretending to be a samurai isn't really a samurai. He wants to think he is. But he was really raised a farmer. But he always wanted to be a samurai, but it was very aristocratic. It was by blood. You couldn't, it's not like now you enlist in the army, you go and you train, and you qualified, now you're in the Green Berets, right? No. If you weren't born into the samurai class, you could never be a samurai, and he wanted to be a samurai. So he taught himself the best he could, but with no real teacher, it's like, what are you going to do? So the test was, the head samurai guy was sitting in the room, and he could be seen through the open doorway, and these people say, yeah, there's our boss, go talk to him. And there's one guy waiting behind the door with the club to hit people over the head. And all the real samurai either wouldn't walk through the door because they knew what was up, or if they did, they could parry the blow quickly. Well, not this guy. He walks in and gets clunked on the head and knocked out. But they end up taking him anyway because they needed 7 and they only had 6, and it was in the script, so they had to take him. And he ends up being a hero and being a true samurai, because it comes from within here. But that's exactly what should happen when you walk through that door, is you extend your field and you know something's not right. Wait a minute, something's not right in the house. That's kind of how I knew the bears were out there when I was going out and chasing bears off this spring. That and my big dogs barking. A particular tone of voice. So this consciousness, you never want to turn off this place of power. You never want to turn it down, but don't turn it off. And then comes the linking. We combine our fields, which is what we're doing in the meditation exercise, but we don't have to always do it, or only do it there. When we're working together as a group, as a Toltec party, we link our fields, and this is what we call pogging. Or we don't call it, that's what it's called in the Diablo 2 game. EJ Gold has been really going, for years he kind of didn't say much about Diablo 2 as a training tool, and in the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden it's back up to the top of his queue. He's talking about it almost daily, he's blogging about it regularly. If you're an early riser, he's online at 6:30 a.m. every day for his daily broadcast. I do it weekly, he does it daily. He's got a much bigger staff than I do to run things for him.
She wants to be paid.
Well, she is. But,
Not enough.
well, I'm not
Thank
paid
you,
enough.
Yvonne.
So when I'm not paid, when I'm paid more, she gets paid more. If you want the link to tune in on what EJ has to say about Diablo 2, send us an email or a messenger gizmo thing on that computer machine, and we will send you the link. Bonnie will do that. Contact her. She's the one for that. And she will hook you up with EJ's 6:30 a.m. link. He goes for about an hour and then he stops and goes about his day. This was in fact one of the secrets of the ancient Toltecs. It still is a secret because most people don't believe that what I'm about to tell you is possible. But there's evidence to suggest that there were entire Toltec cities that linked and did their consciousness in such a way that they all left this dimension simultaneously. Oh, why was this city abandoned? Well, they didn't really abandon it and move somewhere else in this physical world. They abandoned this plane entirely. But it takes work to get everybody vibrating at a level where that's possible. It takes living the Toltec philosophy of holism that they called Toltecayoto, which is from the moment someone's born, they are taught that the purpose of life is the spiritual transcendence of the entire culture, and that by working together they could all achieve that. And that permeates then every aspect of life, from farming and food production to health to education to the very small amount but necessary level of social order that's required. And as soon as you have two or more people, you have to have some kind of agreements on social order. Wait, that was my sandwich in the refrigerator. No, that was my sandwich in the refrigerator. No, I made it, I put it, but no, it was my favorite kind of sandwich. I don't care, it was mine. But I ate it and it was good. You know, so you've got to have rules on whose sandwich goes on which shelf in the refrigerator. How many office arguments have we all seen over the years and decades of people arguing about who stole what out of the office fridge? And then people started getting smart and bringing those little cube refrigerators from home and putting them under their desk and having their own refrigerator. This holistic philosophy, we've talked about it, but not in enough detail, and that's where we're going to be moving now. Because I wanted to get some of this background, this reminder of these key components of the place of power, the draining exercise, the social mask, knowing thyself. You have to come, part of that, of course, is your shadow self. You've got to come to grips with that. If you're not quite there, I'll take you into a deeper, darker cave and throw you in and take all the light and leave you there with no flashlight and let you come to grips with it. Some of you were at the cave expedition, some of you weren't. Everyone who did go actually survived. Some of them grumbled about it. I don't know who that might have been. But yeah, they all survived. But yeah, there's different ways. So we talk about Plato's allegory of the cave. If you go read Plato's allegory of the cave, you kind of know what we're talking about. So I've talked about the shadow self and the yin yang symbols. So I took them out and I threw them in a cave and said, here you go. Figure it out. Have a meditation with your shadow self. And nobody ran away screaming. That was good. That was a good day. It's the details that are important. We have this great theory. It sounds wonderful. It doesn't work. Well, it worked for several thousand years in the Toltec and Anahuac cultures, which is longer than average. Well, it's hard to keep a culture going more than about 200 or 300 years. Maybe 248, maybe 252, some number around that, 249, 251, somewhere around there. It's hard to go beyond that. And yet, we do have cultures that go beyond that.
We do, but they've changed over time.
They change over time, and the more rigid they are, it seems like the faster they fall. And if they change in ways not consistent with their core philosophy, then they crumble even faster. So if you're living in a country based on freedom and value for the individual, and you have documents that say, here's our freedoms, we value this, and then you start implementing short-term monetary gain-oriented policies that take away people's rights and freedoms, that culture is ripe to fall. Not that that would ever happen. Not that people would say, look at all these wonderful freedoms we have and all this opportunity, let's throw it away.
But that's basically what they're doing, just not consciously. By not consciously embracing them, they're subconsciously rejecting them.
So we'll get to the problem. So like educational system, we don't teach certain things anymore. I just read something on the internet today that some huge percent, like 80% of people in the millennial generations don't know what Auschwitz was. And I'm like, how can you get anywhere in an educational system and not at some point in a history class have learned about World War II and the concentration camps and know that the biggest one was Auschwitz? But that's what the article said. They don't know about Auschwitz. So those who ignore history are condemned to repeat it. And you look at what's going on now, it matches what went on in the early stages of like 1930s Germany, which was when all the hype and all the racism and all the fear was building up. And it boiled over in 1939 when Germany started declaring war, and just to refresh people's history. And that's when they started building the concentration camps. And at first they just herded people into the cities and into specific neighborhoods. They put up walls around a certain neighborhood. That's where the term ghetto came from. And then at some point they stopped throwing food in, and then they realized, we want this city for real people, so let's take all the people living in the ghettos and haul them off to these camps that originally were work camps and then became death camps. And it wasn't just Jews, it was mostly Jews, but it was Poles, it was Slavs, it was homosexuals, it was anybody who didn't fit the mold.
Gypsies.
Oh, the gypsies. Yeah, we got to get rid of those gypsies, because who wants people running around Europe in wagons painted with bright colors, singing songs and dancing? They sang songs, they danced, The women wear long flowing dresses and big earrings. How corrupting could that be to our pure society? And the men, I hear that the men gambled and played cards and were good woodworkers and carvers, and they built their own wagons, and they were out there not bothering anybody. That's how radical dancing and music and art. If they stayed in one place and built pyramids, we'd have called them Toltecs, but instead they moved around, so we call them gypsies. Let's kill them. And that's what they started doing. Look at the headlines, right? We have a great need to change the collective consciousness. This is the result of the dumbing down of an educational system, and people everywhere not just saying, I call BS on that. That's wrong. We pass laws that violate our Constitution. In a holistic Tolteca-Yotl system where everybody is raised from day one, and I literally mean day one. The baby comes out, you hold it in your arms, and you start talking to it. As if it were a conscious, sentient being who's going to grow up to be a productive adult.
What a concept.
That's the concept. Training of the children is where this needs to start. And it's tough to get people who, get a critical mass of people who believe that these infants are conscious, sentient beings. And that you can talk to them and they can learn. And look how quickly they learn where the breast is. And that the breast means food. They recognize mothers' faces from other women's faces. Not just, it's a woman's face versus a big, hairy, ugly barbarian face. You know, I'm actually considered quite handsome in barbarian circles. I really am. You know,
He plays that one, doesn't he?
I don't always look like I'm about to take somebody's head off.
He fixes up pretty nice in a kilt.
Yeah, a kilt and a tuxedo jacket. Yeah, I'm okay. And yeah, just don't forget, I've got a knife in my socks. All good barbarians do. Usually this one right here.
Bless you.
Thank you. So, here's a quiz. I've got a knife on the altar. Why?
To get the point.
Is that your final answer?
No.
Okay. No, think about it. Think about what you know about the Tarot.
I really don't know the Tarot that well.
Okay. Do you remember what we taught you about the directions on the altar? What direction is this?
Northwest.
This is east. This room is laid out in the 4 cardinal directions.
Okay.
North, south,
So it's
east.
facing north.
So, well, no, which direction is it located in?
It's not really
It's
Oh,
on
in
the
the
east.
middle.
It's
Yeah.
on the east side of the table.
Yeah.
Which element is associated with
Spirit.
east of earth, air, fire, water, spirits up for the center? this is good. Good review.
Today's
South.
not a day to test me on stuff.
Okay, south is fire. Okay. West is water. North is earth. What's that leave for the east?
What? No, wait. Today's
Air.
not the day.
Air. In the tarot, the swords is one of the suits in the suit cards, and it's associated with the air element. So, sometimes we use incense for the air element, sometimes we'll put feathers, sometimes we'll have a very particular stone, even though it's earth, the properties are air-like, and you put a sword there. And that holds down and anchors the air element. And because I'm sitting in the east, if anybody walks in and gets out of line, I've got a weapon at my disposal. So yeah, I'm a barbarian. I fix up nice. If you see me in a kilt, you know this is warning for the world. You better know that I am armed and I have one or more knives in my socks. I may have some more up my sleeves because I'm a barbarian. And I defend my friends and my family and my school and anybody who is being oppressed. Strangers on the street being oppressed, doesn't matter. My tribe is all beings everywhere. I don't tolerate that. So, we need more people raising their children from day one. And it's hard to get enough people convinced to do that. There's an analogy I'm going to use here that I hope may be useful for people. Our immune systems in our human body, the organs that make antibodies are not fully developed until somewhere around between 2 and 3 years of age. And it's kind of a wide bell curve. That's the average, but it could be a year and a half for some, it could be 4 or more for others. During that time, children rely on getting antibodies from their mothers through breast milk. In order for the mothers to have antibodies to give their children, they themselves needed to have caught all these childhood diseases and grown up and developed a full set of antibodies. Not just the so-called childhood diseases, but flus and any other disease that comes along. And any antibody the mother has is passed on to the child through the breast milk. And as long as the child is nursing, they have protection. When they stop nursing, that protection from mother's milk lasts another roughly 6 to 9 months, maybe a little more. So if they nurse 2 years, they've got 2.5, almost 3 years of protection. During which time their immune systems developed and are fully functional. And then what happens somewhere around 3 or 4? That's when the so-called childhood diseases kick in. Catching the childhood diseases is actually a vital part of the development of our immune systems. those diseases only exist in the human race. Measles don't exist in other animals. And on down the list. And that's why we're supposed to catch them. If you have a child who's being fed properly and nourished properly, has all their vitamins and their minerals and essential fatty acids and essential proteins, and they've developed strongly, the statistics for a child like that, for there being an adverse reaction or a death from the natural case of measles and mumps or chickenpox or any of those, is on the order of 1 in a million. The statistics for those adverse reactions and possible death from the wild case of these childhood illnesses for people who are malnourished and things such as third world countries, the statistics are about, it's one of those serious reactions is about 1 in 100,000 cases. So keeping your child well nourished, all the vitamins and minerals, they're 10 times less likely to have problems from catching the measles, the mumps, and so forth. Vaccination process interferes with that, and that's a whole other conversation. But now that we've had most of the people vaccinated, they're not catching the wild diseases. They don't have natural immunity to pass on to their infants. Now, the immunity isn't the only advantage for mothers breastfeeding their children. But if we get back to having a full generation with or without natural immunity breastfeed their children for the requisite 2 years, and then that generation grows up and those women catch all the childhood diseases, they're going to be better off than the people who are vaccinated, but not as good as if their mothers had full natural immunity. Then that second generation who grows up and has children, they now have, those mothers have full natural immunity to pass on, and then that third generation is back into the proper mode where the human race is supposed to be functioning, having fully immune mothers with all natural immunity to pass on to their children who have all natural immunity. That's the way the human race is intended to be working. That's what our design is, and it's going to take 3 generations for that to happen. And we haven't started that process yet, except in small pockets here and there. But as a whole society, in our holistic Toltec model, we're not there yet. So this goes to food, it goes to health, and it goes to education. We're combining 3 of our Toltec tiers right here on this one subject. Now then, let's look at just the education aspect that I'm talking about. And the one aspect of that, which is the spiritual aspect of recognizing the value of the infant as a potential fully functional adult, working within the reality of this world, that the purpose is spiritual. We're going to need a couple of generations, because some people, even if they're trying now, it's like they're speaking this holistic philosophy with a foreign accent. I know this much Spanish, less Japanese, and less Russian, right? And about that same amount or less of Scottish Gaelic. And if I go to any one of those countries, and the only foreign country I've been to speak any of this was, I've been to Mexico, and I've been to Japan. I stopped in Japan on my way to China. Said a few things in the airport, because I never left the Japanese airport, the people who were working there, and one word out of my mouth, even if they couldn't recognize that I'm not Japanese, and they know that I'm a foreigner because I speak with this incredible foreign accent. I know the right words, I can speak them, they knew the words I was speaking, but I'm clearly not fluent, right? When I go to Mexico, except for my height, I can almost pull off from a distance looking Hispanic. I have a lot of Hispanic friends who have whiter skin than I do, but they actually make, I'm not trying to think, I joke with a couple of them that they don't make good white people and I don't make good Hispanic people, right? My skin looks closer than theirs, but I don't speak fluently. One word out, it's like, oh yeah, he's a gringo, right? And they come out here, they look whiter than me, and one word out of their mouth, and it's like, they're Hispanic. We don't know. And this Toltec philosophy, holism, another place I see it is people who were conventionally trained as medical doctors. Strictly the Western scientific model. They followed it religiously. It didn't work. So now they're out trying to learn some of the natural holistic things, whether you call it functional medicine, natural medicine, biological medicine, naturopathic medicine. They're out trying to learn that, implement it, and then when you talk to them, there's certain things they understand, and the closer it comes to the Western biochemical model, the better they understand it. So the biochemistry of nutrition and food, they understand that. They can look at the pharmacology of vitamin C or something like that. But then when you start talking to them about the energy in foods, they go, huh? And they speak holism with a foreign accent. They're speaking with the reductionist accent. So we have to be patient. We have to recognize that people, if they start down this path, they're going to be doing the best they can. And it's the children that are so important. The children have to be valued by a culture. A culture that sells its children, which is rampant in the news lately, is an evil culture. When you have major religions justifying that behavior, when you have governments involved in protecting the abuse of children.
Killing the firstborn.
Right. That's yet an even another way, which I haven't mentioned, which is the countries who decide they want male children but not females, and they practice infanticide. And I'm sitting here thinking, all those men are going to grow up, and who are they going to marry? And this right now is a huge issue in China. Right? There's places where as soon as the gender is determined and it can be seen through an ultrasound in the womb, if it's not the right gender, they have an abortion and try again. And it's like, well, now they've got something like where...
What is the reason for that?
I may not be the right person to ask, because even when I was in China, I was in Taiwan, not mainland China, and talked to people. I asked that question, and I even asked the real obvious question, well, who are all these boys going to marry when they become adults if you've gotten rid of all the women, which is the obvious question. And now in the place over there, there's like 70% or more population is men. It's like half the men don't have a potential of getting a wife. But did you think this one through?
India does that too.
Yeah.
Well, all ancient cultures did it. So some of this is just a throwback from the ancient times. But on top of that, then there was the population explosion in Asia, and China was trying to control that by limiting that you could only have 2 children, preferably 1.
Right.
Well, if you're only going to have, 1 child, they want it to be a male. But nobody really thought through the long-term effect of that, and within a relatively short period of time, they had already bred out all the girls.
So it's a huge issue. Yeah, they are a patriarchal society. When they take, and you see these things over there, when a new baby is born, they take a picture of it, dressed from the waist up, completely nude from the waist down, with the legs spread, to show off the male genitals, and you send those pictures out to all the friends and family to prove that it's a male child.
Oh, that's creepy.
Because when you have a baby, everybody in your extended family gives you a monetary gift. And you get more money from a boy child than a girl child. So that's part. It's very cultural, and it's deep-rooted, and it's like, I don't get it. I mean, I understand what's going on, but I look at it and it's like, well, it's just, if you wipe out half your women, you kind of just shot yourself in the foot. And yes, it's an ultimate example of not valuing life and valuing your children. It's like, look how important women are. I mean, they're our mothers. That's who bears the next generation. You want a male child to carry on the family name in a patriarchal society, but who's he supposed to breed with? Women. So, duh. So this is the problem. One of the issues, not a problem, it's an issue that needs to be dealt with up front, is we have to start valuing the children. We have to tell them they're important. We have to teach them from the day they're born, while they still have those strong connections to the spirit realms. We have to teach them how to maintain that while they're acclimatized into a culture. We have to be able to communicate with them. They have to go through that process. And Coyote talks about this a lot, right? That acclimatization process. I'm kind of jumping to the end, which is, we have to value these children. We have to teach them, and they have to understand that the spirituality is what's important about the culture. And that's what the Anahuac cultures were doing for thousands of years. They ramped up, and they were in that steady state mode, and it was a lot of outside influences started to shift, and disasters and continents blowing up and things like that getting away. And human nature, I mean, they kept that coherency going far longer than average, but then, just like the incense that you can imagine burning here that's not tonight, it goes up in that smooth lamar flow, and then it breaks down. We all seen that. And that's the issue with cultures that forget their roots. They forget the why. And when the more you deny that spiritual connection, the less length of time that culture lasts. And so right now, the United States of America, I've alluded to, but I'm calling it right now, is we are cutting, as a culture, not everybody, I mean, certainly nobody watching this, but this is the issue that's out there to be dealt with, and this is why we're using the back door, if you will. I want to use the computer hacking analogy. We're going in through the back door into the collective consciousness and trying to get this valuable signal in there that God is alive, love is the answer. First, we're starting with healthy weather, and then we're going to go on, and probably the children will be the next one that we add in. because we have to take this theory and put it in practice. And I'll have more information about that over the next few weeks. I have something planned for that. Questions?
I just, not yet. I think it's a little bit behind.
Okay.
Do you want to say anything about the idea that things might get better before they get worse? Or what?
It might get worse before they get better.
Better before they get worse.
I like what she said.
Yeah, right. Or that we may, that there's, I don't know, things within
Yeah.
God's time, I guess.
When you look at the prophecies, there's biblical prophecies, there's Australian Aboriginal prophecies, there's Native American prophecies, there's Egyptian prophecy, there's prophecies everywhere, almost. And when you look at anyone's set, you kind of go, look at all this quaint language and look at all these weird concepts. But when you start looking at the sum total, they all start to tell a very similar story. And they all start to tell signs of when society's about to come crashing down and there's going to be a major upheaval, and after a period of time of upheaval, those who come out of it are going to have a new golden age. And when you start looking at all of the prophecies in total, what's going on now in the world, everything from politics and nature and chemtrails and the sea boiling and creatures dying and forests burning, it appears that the time of upheaval that these prophecies foretold is basically now. We're heading into the beginning, we're either at the end of the beginning or the beginning of the mid-game, if you want to use a combination of a Churchill quote and a chess game. This isn't someday bad things will happen and signify the start of the end times. We're there. Now, how long till it gets really worse, how long it really lasts, how bad it gets. The Hopis had a saying which is hopeful, because what they said is how bad it gets, how long it lasts, how fast we recover, depends on how many people wake up now and start living and behaving in a more holistic manner, such as turning back to a holistic society. As an example, the best example I'm aware of that includes the whole society is the Toltec philosophy. I've studied and initiated into this lineage, and so therefore I'm biased. But I went into this lineage because of its holistic nature. And nothing else comes close, in my opinion. Somebody has a better model, show me. I'm open to that, yeah.
Being biased myself, I would say that, when we look at the fall of the Aztec culture, that philosophy had fallen apart. Where we see it more, I think it was with the more of the Plains Indians, where they sustained their lifestyle for well over 1,000 or more years of with this kind of philosophy. And I think at the same time the Celts did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now they got wiped out, several thousand years earlier, but for over 1,000 years they had a similar type of semi-nomadic lifestyle, and they had a code of ethics and law and doing business within their culture. So I think there's something about the sustainability of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a lot of great empires that rise and fall, but as far as being in harmony with nature, being in harmony with God, having a respect for things, and not taking a huge footprint on the earth, not doing a major amount of damage by creating these huge civilizations that destroy everything, all the resources. That's another culture similar that is using a similar kind of philosophy.
Yeah, I like the Celtic analogy, and the Aztecs were moving for a long time, and they actually didn't last that long once they got to what's now Mexico City, Lake Texcoco. It didn't last that long. The period of time for the Anahuac, which is purely oral tradition, is 6,000-7,000 years ago-ish, up until 2,500 years ago-ish was when they were at a more steady state. Then I think that's when you started to get a lot more influx into North America from elsewhere, more from Asia, more from other ways from Europe and elsewhere, and that seems to have been harder to maintain at that point. So yeah, it was a long time, and it was a long time ago, and we still have the remnants of that infiltrated into our cultures throughout North America, less so in the United States because the European settlers did such a good job of killing people that were here. So it is prophesied to get worse. The model that the Hopi described is more of that 60s bumper sticker, think globally but act locally. So become sustainable locally. Don't expend jet fuel to fly grapes from Chile in the middle of the winter here. If you want grapes in the middle of the winter here, build a greenhouse. There was just something a day or two ago I saw about a farmer in Iceland. Iceland, land of ice. A farmer in Iceland growing bananas. He's raising bananas successfully in Iceland because he has a greenhouse. And I think he's using geothermal heat. And so it's, of which they have a lot in Iceland, because it's not just the land of ice, it's the land of fire and ice. They have lots of volcanoes, they have geothermal energy, that's how they generate electricity, that's how they generate heat. They have wonderful volcanic mineral baths in Iceland, which I highly recommend. But yeah, this guy's growing, he built his greenhouse, he bought the plants, and now he's got a banana farm in Iceland. And that model can be used anywhere that people are creative. So it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be local. So the term sustainable gets bandied about, And can you please take a note? I want to talk about that next week. I don't want to rush through sustainable. Because that's actually a big topic, and it's directly related to the details of implementing this philosophy. So I want it, and I would love if people came in next week with questions and comments about how can we set up a sustainable model of training our children about spirituality and their true nature and the spiritual nature of our culture from the get-go. And sustainability extends into all aspects, and there's misinformation galore on what that really means out there in internet land. And it's one of those concepts that's largely ignored and ridiculed in the mainstream media and so forth. Yeah.
I would like to hear, this is off topic of what you're talking about, when you went to that convention about what's going on in Mesoamerica.
Oh.
I never heard a report back from you two about what's of interest.
The one earlier this year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That doesn't exactly fit.
Yeah. But I mean, sometime I would like to hear about it.
I'm not sure that's suitable for one of these discussions where we have a different agenda. It was about other. We'll talk afterwards.
Okay.
And we can tell you that. My part of that was presenting a few basics about the Toltec philosophy. And I will probably go back next spring when that happens again. It's actually happening right about now. They have it every 6 months, or in another month or so. I guess it's in a month. But I have too many conflicts. The fall is not as good a time for me to go. The spring one is when I'll go.
Well, I would say that the first couple of discussions after we got back, as we were talking about, different aspects of the Toltec culture, a lot of that is stuff that came out of our research for that conference. But there's more that could be said on that.
There's more that can be said, and it is off topic for this, but I'm happy to share it.
Yeah.
So Melody didn't have a question. I haven't seen anything from Sarah, so I'm not sure if we lost her, because at one point I had to reboot. But Maria has a question.
Yes.
When I am stretching out my energy and there's a thunderstorm outside like there is now, could my energy body be harmed by weather or anything at all?
Good question.
It's possible, but it's your energy bodies can be damaged by lightning. Certainly we are affected. There's people that I know who feel the approach of a storm.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just electromagnetic. It's not just barometric pressure. It is also the energy bodies that are sensing that. When you're anchored here and you extend a finger out there, by finger I don't literally mean a finger, I mean any extension of your energy field, which isn't limited to the shape of your body, by the way. You can make it do whatever you want. When you walk in here, I told you fill the room with your attention, which is the extension of your fields. It's going to look like a rectangular cube, because that's what this room is shaped like. So the damage to the energy bodies is mostly going to happen if your physical body gets struck by lightning, or it's close. The closest I'm aware that lightning has ever struck near me was I was driving through the Arizona desert right through the middle of a thunderstorm, which when I was still 50 miles away, it was gorgeous watching it. And there's these patterns that were just elegant and complex and wonderful. And as I got closer, I realized, holy wow, I have to drive right through the middle of that. And it was, I don't know, a couple 100 feet, no more than that, to the side of the road. And maybe at the instant it happened, it was just ahead of me, like by 50 yards or so, and I'm going, you know, like 55, 60 miles an hour in a pouring rainstorm, and it, boom, and you could see all the stuff. That was like 200 feet away, and I felt it. I felt the static discharge and whatnot. But unless it hits you, you're probably not going to damage your energy body. If it actually hits you or gets real close, then there can be a separation, so your physical body's here, your energy body's a little off, and then you have to work to bring those back. You had a question?
Well, I guess what you're saying is that if there's a physical reaction with your body, that it could damage your etheric bodies,
Yeah.
or energy bodies. But it seems to be like working with energy during a lightning storm could potentially be the conduit that creates a physical interaction. And so in that way, there's two things, like I've been outdoors where I have used the energy and felt that I called a storm, or, you know, sensed that I had an influence on the weather.
Yeah.
That said, I wouldn't go out in the middle of an electric storm and start being a conduit for energy.
Right.
And so in that way, what I might do, because like I have really straight hair, that when there is an electrical storm, I get a lot of static electricity on my body itself, is that I would probably tend to more use the energy itself to ground.
Mm.
And to discharge any of that staticness
Yeah.
from around me or my auric field.
Because you do have to recall that, yeah, there's resonance between energies on this plane and the higher planes. The electricity is very high voltage, but it's electricity. It can create resonances on the higher planes, but it too is a physical entity. And I've heard of a lot of people, not a lot, I've read of a few people who've been hit by electricity, lightning. And
There's some people that have been hit more than once.
well, yeah, there's some people who've been hit more than once, but that's not my point. My point is, after they've been hit, they have alterations of their personality, they have alterations in their physical capabilities, either better, worse, more or less, just different. That when you read about this, you can start to recognize that they had some damage to their energy bodies, and or most likely a separation. Or now the good news is that those energy bodies are probably a lot better capable of healing than the physical body is if you get struck by lightning.
So Sarah says, I don't see how an energy body can be harmed. It could react to things, but how could it be harmed? And then Melody says, I wouldn't imagine it being harmed, but definitely being influenced. And then Sarah says, has anyone ever tapped into energy of one of the fires, not the energy of the people reacting to the destruction, but the fire itself as an entity?
Okay, you're asking a lot. So
Yeah.
It's hard to damage energy bodies, but it is. I mean, when I do shamanic healings, a lot of what I'm doing is fixing, for example, etheric scar tissue.
Mm-hmm.
The energy body can be damaged, and there can be the etheric equivalent of scar tissue. And it's less common on the astral and above, but it's there. We can damage it. We can lose a piece. It can be off center.
Like in a
disconnected.
car accident.
Yeah. The answer to your question about the fires is yes. People have tapped into that, which is how a lot of the information started to be uncovered that these aren't natural fires, that they were man-made using dark technology. And the Reading fire falls into this category. It
So
was
it's
started
not-
by a quote-unquote mechanical failure of an automobile on Carr Road. That's the story, and they're sticking to it. I don't believe it. I believe that automobile was destroyed with the direct energy weapon, high power lasers. There's basic facts about fire, that it burns at a certain temperature, let's say 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. Aluminum melts about 1000 degrees or more higher than that, and yet these fires are melting aluminum rims on vehicles. You can see rivers of aluminum that later solidify in people's driveways. That's not possible in a brush fire. It's just not possible. So some other heat source had to be involved. And like I said, I don't want to go there because this fire is still being investigated. This fire is still going on. There's a lot of information out there now of evidence and analysis from those North Bay fires a year ago. So that's where you can find a lot of that. Question?
I just wanted to speak to this idea of tapping into the energy of one of the fires, not necessarily the people. So I guess most of the work that I've done with the visualization has been more about the fire or the atmospheres that fuel a fire. So short of being able to create rain, I've actually been working a lot with more of a fog or a mist or a wetness that comes up from the earth itself. Kind of like when you have put out a fire with a hose and everything is, just wet, So I've been that's more of the emphasis of the visualizations that I've been doing, is working with the elements themselves rather than, sending the signal to people to be aware and, to get the help they need and stuff. To actually work with the balancing of the elements is kind of how I've been going about it.
Okay. So long-winded answer to your question, Maria, but it's unlikely that a storm out there can damage your bodies if you extend them out. It takes a lot of energy to damage them, and yes, it is possible to damage them. But that electricity is more of a physical phenomenon. It's going to more affect the physical body, unless your storms are being triggered or involving HAARP or the 5G towers or these high power direct energy lasers, in which case there can be some of those frequencies that might have more resonance that harm this. But that said, I can tell you the number one most potent protection against that kind of damage is the Akadua. So just having the Akadua and using it regularly, it builds up a strength in you. That is as good a shield as we have available to us. And especially if you use it with that intent. Any other questions? Okay. I think we're done tonight. Thank you. And we'll be back next week. Sustainability and ideas for children.